Beneath the scorching vault of the Persian desert, the proud columns of Persepolis stand in silent watch over the ruins of a once glorious city. The hot wind carries the echo of former splendor, whispering among the carved stones the story of a citadel that long ago dominated a world. Persepolis, its name taken from ancient Greek and meaning city of the Persians, was regarded by its contemporaries as the most magnificent capital of the ancient age. In the heart of this legendary site, imagination now carries us back 2,500 years to a time when this place teemed with life and sparkled with wealth. In the distance loom the shadows of the great king and his subjects, silhouettes lost in the mists of time, but whose presence can almost be felt amid the remnants. Prepare for an epic journey into the tale of Persepolis, from its majestic birth under Darius the Great, through the myths that surround it, to its dramatic end in flames and the legacy it bequeathed to posterity. The story of Persepolis begins at the turn of the 6th to 5th centuries before Christ, during the reign of King Darius I of the Achaemenid dynasty. Darius the Great, who ruled from 522 to 486 before Christ, resolved to raise a new ceremonial capital for his vast empire, a palace city intended to symbolize the power and diversity of the Persian people. Building seems to have begun about 518 before Christ, on a broad plateau at the foot of Mount Kui Ramet, the Mountain of Mercy, in what is today the province of Fars in southwestern Iran. The site was chosen with care, a relatively isolated region encircled by mountains, at the confluence of the Pulvar and Khor rivers, far from the older capitals of Pasargadae, Susa, and Babylon. This strategic location offered security, shielding the new capital from external threats and internal rebellion. At the same time, the monumentality of the project conveyed a clear message. Far from the intrigues of the past, Darius was founding his own covenant of imperial power and continuity. Soon Persepolis began to take shape under the skilled hands of architects and craftsmen drawn from every corner of the empire. Spread across an artificial terrace of about 15 hectares, the city emerged as a complex of sumptuous palaces, audience halls, and temples, all raised upon a high platform of immense stone blocks, polished to a marble-like sheen. No effort and no expense were spared to make Persepolis a showcase of imperial greatness. Precious and exotic materials arrived from thousands of kilometers away. Cedar wood from the forests of Lebanon, gold from India, ivory and rare gems, Tyrian purple dye, silver and alabaster, all contributing to the rich adornment of the buildings. Walls and stairways were embellished with fine bas-reliefs depicting processions of nobles and envoys, while glazed bricks in yellow, brown, or green sparkled in the sunlight. The city was conceived as a grand stage for imperial ceremonies, rather than as an ordinary metropolis. Here would be celebrated the annual festival of Nowruz, the Persian New Year. And here the great king would receive delegations from throughout the empire. Thus, Persepolis functioned primarily as a vast ceremonial and administrative complex, active chiefly during the spring season, rather than as a permanent population center. Even so, its prestige was immense. Persepolis was the symbolic heart of the Persian Empire, the place where the King of Kings, the traditional title of Achaemenid monarchs, affirmed his authority before subjects drawn from the four quarters of the known world. The society of the Achaemenid Empire was diverse and tolerant. stretching from the Indus Valley to the Nile, and uniting many peoples, languages, and faiths under one banner. Persepolis mirrored this cultural diversity perfectly. The bas-reliefs on the stairways of the Apadana, the great audience hall, show processions of emissaries from 23 subject nations: Medes, Egyptians, Babylonians, Indians, Lydians, and many others, bringing rich gifts to the king. Each group appears in its traditional costume with distinct physical features and offerings specific to its homeland, from vessels of gold and precious textiles to sacred animals. It is a demonstration carved in stone of the empire's unity in diversity. Even the language of the royal inscriptions reflects that variety. At Persepolis were found gold and silver tablets inscribed in 3 tongues: Old Persian, Elamite, and Babylonian, proclaiming the empire's frontiers and Darius's prayer to the god Ahura Mazda. Protect this land from enemies, from drought, and from falsehood. This detail reveals the care with which acts of governance were recorded and the deep faith of the kings in divine protection for their people. Politically, Persepolis was not the sole residence of the Persian monarchs. They divided their time among other capitals, such as Susa, Ecbatana, and Babylon. Yet Persepolis was the sacred locus of ceremonies and the imperial throne. Here, Darius and his successors held lavish festivals, received their generals and governors, issued edicts, and gathered the empire's treasuries. During the reign of Darius, then of his son Xerxes I, who ruled from 486 to 465 before Christ, and of Artaxerxes I, who ruled from 465 to 424 before Christ. The complex at Persepolis expanded continually. Each king added new constructions and ornaments, leaving his mark in stone beside the names of his predecessors. The names and faces of Darius, Xerxes, and Artaxerxes adorn the walls and columns discovered by archaeologists, testifying across millennia to the pride of the Achaemenid dynasty. The ceremonial capital had become, therefore, a dynamic project on which successive generations labored, each adding new layers of splendor. Although Persepolis has a clear origin in the time of Darius the Great, Persian legends like to place it in a much older mythical realm. The Persian name for the ruins, still used by locals today, is Takht-e-Jamshid, the throne of Jamshid. Jamshid is a legendary king in Iranian mythology, a civilizing hero described in the national epic Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, by the poet Ferdowsi. According to legend, Jamshid ruled in a golden age, commanding supernatural forces and enjoying divine favor. Tradition says he built glittering palaces with the help of divs, spirits or demons, and had a magic throne on which he could fly. Linking Persepolis to this semi-divine figure reveals the deep impression the ruins made on popular imagination. Later generations could not conceive that mere mortals, even great kings, had been able to raise such a marvel, and so attributed it to the legendary Jamshid. Historically, we know Jamshid had no connection with Persepolis, yet collective memory preferred to envelop the city's origins in the aura of myth. Another folk name for the site is Chehel Minar, 40 columns, inspired by the multitude of columns whose reflections in water basins seem to double endlessly. These poetic names and stories, passed from generation to generation, have given Persepolis a legendary dimension. Villagers imagined the royal court bustling with benevolent peris and divs flying through the air to build monumental stairways for King Jamshid. Even the city's decline was interpreted through the filter of myth. Jamshid, after a long and glorious reign, fell into the sin of pride, lost divine favor, and was defeated by the forces of evil. In similar fashion, real Persepolis, the earthly work of the Achaemenid kings, met a cruel fate, destroyed by a foreign conqueror, whom Persians viewed as the incarnation of vengeance and calamity. Beyond local myths, Persepolis stirred wonder among foreigners. The Greeks, who called it Persepolis, had heard only rumors of Persian riches before seeing them with their own eyes. The historian Herodotus, though he does not mention Persepolis directly, emphasizes the opulence of the Persian court and remarks that Darius was a merchant, meaning a king concerned with selling the image of his grandeur to the world. Symbolically, Persepolis was exactly that, a gleaming showcase of the empire, a city seemingly built to astonish visiting envoys and to remain in collective memory as the supreme expression of Oriental power. Over time, as the Persian Empire waned and new empires rose, precise knowledge of Persepolis's origins faded. When Arab and European travelers of the late Middle Ages came upon the ruins half buried in sand, they associated them variously with King Solomon's palace or fabulous fortresses from the tales of 1001 Nights. Thus, Persepolis lived not only in history books, but also in the realm of legend, a bridge between archaeological reality and universal myths of vanished cities and lost civilizations. Persepolis's greatness lies not only in legend, but also in the concrete achievements of Persian architecture, engineering, and administration. From the very entrance to the sacred terrace, an ancient visitor was struck by the monumental double staircase on the western side, 111 broad stone steps, so gently sloped and precisely cut that nobles could ascend in file, without effort, their long robes flowing as they carried gifts for the great king. At the top stretched a panorama of opulence. Scores of giant columns supported palace roofs. Today, 13 columns still stand in Darius's Apadana Hall, each more than 19 meters high. And at the Gate of All Nations, built by Xerxes, 2 original columns still rise. A third has been re-erected from fragments. Every capital was carved in the shape of bulls, lions, or winged griffins, symbols of royalty and divine protection. The walls bore brightly colored frescoes and reliefs showing the king's elite guard, the 10,000 immortals, emblematic soldiers of Persian military might. The whole ensemble radiated grandeur and order, reflecting both the technological skill of the builders and the economic wealth that could sustain such a project for more than a century. Urban infrastructure at Persepolis was remarkably advanced. Although the city served mainly seasonal ceremonies, it possessed facilities that would inspire admiration even today. Persian engineers devised an ingenious system for supplying fresh water, for drainage, and for channeling rainwater, vital in a region subject to winter rains and to snowmelt from the mountains. An underground network of channels, gutters, and settling basins carved in the rock prevented the terrace from flooding and ensured water for the royal court, gardens, and fountains. This attention to engineering details demonstrates the Persians' advanced understanding of resource management and the environment. At Persepolis, archaeologists have also discovered thousands of clay tablets, the so-called fortification tablets, which form a genuine administrative archive of the empire. The cuneiform inscriptions on these tablets, accidentally fired by the blaze that consumed the buildings, have survived for millennia and now offer a window onto the economy and daily life of Achaemenid Persia. They record allocations of provisions and rations for workers, artisans, and officials, highlight the presence of women in the distribution system, and even mention religious festivals for which preparations were made. Thus, although Persepolis was not a classical commercial city with permanent public markets, whenever the royal court was present, it became a hive of activity. Officials distributed grain, wine, and beer to staff and guests. Local artisans and others from the provinces vied to supply luxury goods for the palace. And foreign craftsmen, Phoenician, Babylonian, Greek, worked side by side with Persian masters, decorating and maintaining the complex. A fascinating example of multicultural collaboration is the discovery of a fragment of a statue of Darius, bearing a fine silhouette of a man and animals shaded with a fine needle, a technique suggesting the hand of a Greek artist employed in the service of the great king. From a military and logistical standpoint, Persepolis was well defended and organized. The complex was surrounded by 3 concentric fortified walls, each equipped with watchtowers, safeguarding the treasure and the royal family sheltered within. Separate zones existed for the army garrison stationed nearby, as well as royal stables and storehouses for chariots, evidence that the king wished to keep both military force and ceremonial transport close at hand. The vast riches collected as tribute from conquered peoples were stored in the Persepolis treasury, considered the safest place in the empire. Behind its walls lay chambers filled with gold, silver, jewels, and priceless works of art, guarded day and night. The ancient historian Diodorus of Sicily reports that when the Macedonians plundered Persepolis, they found treasures gathered since Cyrus the Great, amounting to 2,500 tons of silver. A colossal fortune that required thousands of pack animals to move. This unequaled wealth only heightened Persepolis's fame and, in the end, helped draw destruction upon it. Life at Persepolis therefore revolved around the ceremonial season. One can picture the bustle around the spring equinox, when delegations from the entire empire began to arrive. Caravans laden with exotic gifts, Persian guards gleaming in ceremonial armor, Zoroastrian priests swinging censers and chanting prayers, officials rushing to welcome their guests. Temporary markets likely sprang up at the foot of the terrace, where merchants from Babylon, Egypt, or India displayed their wares, silks, spices, perfumes, talismans, creating a multicolored bazaar in the shade of towering walls. Inside the palace, skilled chefs prepared feasts with the choicest foods of the age, from game and fish from the Caspian Sea to dried fruits and sweet wine from the vineyards of Asia Minor. Every corner of Persepolis pulsed with life when the King of Kings held court. When the festivities ended, the bustle gradually subsided. The processions moved on. The royal household traveled to summer residences, and Persepolis returned to its solemn quiet, preserving, like an invisible amphora, the memory of days of celebration. The zenith of Persepolis lasted about 2 centuries until fate overtook it at the hands of one of history's most renowned conquerors. In the year 330 before Christ, after a series of crushing victories over the Persians, Alexander the Great and his Macedonian army entered Persepolis. Macedonians are said to have been astonished by the splendor of the treasures they found there. The royal hoards, works of art, and luxurious buildings. Yet the conqueror's fate left this place. Joy proved short-lived. According to the historian Diodorus, one night during a victory banquet, Alexander's soldiers, drunk with wine and urged on, legend says, by Greek courtesans in their company, threw flaming torches onto the palace rugs, starting a devastating blaze. The flames spread rapidly, consuming the cedar roofs of the palaces and devouring the richly furnished chambers. Persepolis, the proud ceremonial capital of the Persian Empire, burned to its foundations in an inferno that licked the night sky and terrified the few inhabitants remaining. Motivations behind the destruction of Persepolis remain debated by historians to this day. Some ancient sources suggest that Alexander set the city on fire in revenge, a symbolic gesture for Xerxes' burning of Athens 150 years earlier. Others believe it was a spontaneous act born of collective drunkenness and the soldiers' desire to assert their supremacy over a former rival power. What is certain is that before permitting the destruction, Alexander ordered the systematic looting of the treasuries. For several days, the Persian treasure was loaded onto mules and camels and escorted toward Greece and Babylon. By this act, the Macedonian conqueror emptied the economic heart of the Achaemenid Empire, taking for himself and for his emerging realm the wealth accumulated by generations of Persian kings. After Alexander departed, Persepolis never recovered. Bereft of its treasures and structurally ruined, the city was gradually abandoned. What people did not destroy, time did. The charred buildings collapsed, columns felled by fire remained toppled on the ground, and desert dust and oblivion settled over the ruins. Parts of the complex also suffered from earthquakes that struck the region across the centuries, hastening decay. Locals continued to know of the throne of Jamshid, but to the wider world, Persepolis became nearly a lost city, shrouded in mystery. Only in the 17th century did Western scholars correctly identify the ruins with the Persian citadel mentioned by classical authors. Persepolis' decline may seem free of the intrigues of other vanished civilizations. It was neither submerged like Atlantis, nor buried by a volcano like Pompeii. Yet its symbolism is equally dramatic. A city of glory burned in one night of violence, marking the end of one empire and the dawn of another. For Persians, it meant not only the loss of a city, but the collapse of their world. With Persepolis reduced to smoldering ruins, the First Persian or Achaemenid Empire breathed its last, yielding the stage to new masters of the East. Today, more than 2 millennia after its fall, Persepolis continues to fascinate and to inspire. Its ruins, listed as a World Heritage Site by the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization in 1979, attract visitors from every continent who come to walk among the columns and bas reliefs that have outlasted time. The archaeological site speaks of a sophisticated and tolerant civilization, of Persian art and ingenuity, but also of the fragility of even the greatest human achievements. The fact that inscriptions in stone and clay have endured, some of them hardened by the very fire that destroyed the palaces, allows us today, as if in a whisper, to hear the lost voices of Achaemenid scribes, craftsmen, and courtiers. Every stone at Persepolis bears the imprint of a story, a military victory commemorated in relief, a tribute to the king carved on a step, a god invoked in a cuneiform inscription buried beneath foundations. Persepolis' legacy also has a modern face full of meaning. In the year 1971, the last Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, chose the ruins of Persepolis to celebrate 2,500 years since the founding of the Persian monarchy. A sumptuous event in which the ruins were illuminated and redecorated, as though the spirit of Darius returned for one night to see his palace once more ablaze with light and life. Although that imperial festival remains controversial, it once again demonstrated the symbolic power of Persepolis. Even in ruins, the city continues to be a national emblem of Iran and a testament to cultural continuity. Looking today at the solitary columns outlined against the sky of the Middle East, it is impossible not to feel a blend of admiration and melancholy. Admiration, because Persepolis embodies the grand dream of an entire civilization, a place where architecture became both imperial propaganda and art, where every stone expressed the order of an ancient world. Melancholy, because its ruins remind us that no empire is eternal, no matter how immortal. Its kings may have called their guard, yet the story of Persepolis is not one of total oblivion, but on the contrary, a story of rebirth through memory. Every tourist who crosses the gate of all nations, every scholar who deciphers a tablet from the royal archive, every Iranian who proudly utters the name Takhti Jamshid revives, for a moment, the soul of this ancient city. In this way, Persepolis, like the legendary phoenix of Persian myth, rises again and again from its own ashes in humanity's consciousness, continuing to stand as a silent witness of history over the past and to inspire our future.